as JR just mentioned, I'm the author and presenter of the Ruby on Rails tutorial book and the Rails tutorial screencasts, and I'm here to tell you the story. I'm here to tell you the story of the Rails tutorial project. And I just want to get a quick survey. How many people here have read the Rails tutorial book or know about it? Okay, so quite a lot of people. That's great. So just a little bit of my own background, just to set the stage for the Rails tutorial project. I have a background in theoretical physics, and I did physics research in graduate school at Caltech, where I also taught classes in the physics core curriculum. But while I was in grad school, I got bitten by the entrepreneur bug. And so after I graduated, I thought, I'm going to go a different way. I'm not going to become an academic. And one of the influences for me was a series of essays, including this one called How to Start a Startup, by a man named Paul Graham. And interestingly, Paul has a similar sort of background. He had a PhD in computer science from Harvard and decided not to become an academic. And one of the things he discovered after he graduated, this is cutting in and out, isn't it? Yeah. One of the things that he discovered after he graduated is that he was doing Lisp consulting, which, as he says, it was like treading water. It was easy, but he knew he would drown if he stopped. And so he decided that he wanted to solve his money problem by starting a startup. And so I thought, that seems like a good idea. What happened with Paul's company is he ended up selling it to Yahoo for a large amount of money, and he did solve his money problem. So I thought, well, maybe I can solve my money problem, and I'll start a startup too. The startup I started with one of my Caltech friends was a fantasy sports startup, of all things. It was pretty cool, and for a variety of reasons, it didn't quite work out, including some things beyond our control. And so I was left with another kind of money problem, which is, didn't really have a whole lot of money. After doing a startup, you watch your savings. I mean, I was in grad school before that too, so you can do the math on how much money I had floating around. So after my first startup shut down, one of my friends from Caltech was approached about writing a book on Rails, and I thought, well, that's a good thing to do. Maybe if I write a book, that will help me in my technical career. And so we wrote this book together called Railspace. I'd like to apologize for the title. This is my fault. The title is Railspace, Building a Social Networking Website with Ruby on Rails. And so people thought it was about social networking, and building a social networking website. But it really was just a Rails tutorial book that happened to use a social networking website as its example application. Now, the publisher wanted to call this book Ruby on Rails Tutorial, which I thought, this is such a boring, stupid name for a book. Why would you ever want to call it something so lame? So I talked them into Railspace. So that's my fault. But somehow I think I'm going to atone for that mistake. And actually, Railspace did really well. It was very well received, and I think for a time, for maybe the first 6 months, it was really like the best Rails tutorial out there. But then something happened. The REST revolution hit. When we started Railspace, it was I think Rails was like 1.1, and those of you who do a lot of Rails application development know, especially if you've been doing it for a while, know that there was a big shift in the way Rails applications are structured. And so we did have some REST structured application code in the book, but most of the book was not RESTful, as they say. And so it went out of date pretty fast. And even though it did pretty well for a technical book, even a technical book isn't going to solve your money problem. And the next thing I did was to do another startup. It takes me a while to learn things, I guess. I applied and was accepted to a program called Combinator, which, among other things, was started by Paul Graham, who I mentioned previously, along with several of his colleagues. And I'm not going to go into details. This is a blank slide by design. I've applied with one idea, with my co-founder and I had one idea, and then we switched to another idea, and we tried another idea. And sometimes people say, oh, no, we're really interested in hearing, we're interested in hearing what the ideas were, like the process. And if you say to me, you're interested in hearing about that, I believe you. I just don't want to talk about it. It was painful, it was unpleasant at times. But the something about the Y Combinator program you should know, which is that at the end of this entrepreneur program, you give a pitch. You give a pitch.
Try holding it down the mic.
You give a pitch to a large number of investors, including a lot of the biggest shots in Silicon Valley. And so Paul is always telling you, you must fear demo day. You must fear demo day. It's like a shark coming to get you, or possibly a hippo. Something big and dangerous. And so Paul's saying, wait a minute, what was your book about again? Something about social networks? Well, do that, make a social networking platform. So that's how InSoci was born. It was sort of born out of desperation to have something to say on demo day. And actually InSoci did pretty well in the sense that it got quite a bit of adoption. It was, for the time, one of the top most popular fork repositories on GitHub. It wasn't really a business by itself, but we actually did attract some investor interest and like a jumping off, using InSoci as a jumping off point. And we were actually on the brink of raising a substantial amount of money around October of 2008. Depicted here. Do you remember what the markets were doing in October of 2008? It turns out that was a bad time to be on the brink of raising a lot of money. And so our potential investors kind of gave us the runaround for a while, and they said, finally they said, we'll be happy to fund you if you can show us a mature product with lots of traction. And so for those of you who don't know, this is how they say no in Silicon Valley. It's a polite no, and I heard that potential investors know ill will, but unfortunately, it left me with the same situation I had, which is I've got the wrong kind of money problem. I want to solve this money problem, and it's not working out. So I started to think about this, and I decided to analyze this sort of from first principles. There's this balance between risk and reward. And sort of at the low end, you've got a job, which is, it's actually, I have a very positive view on jobs, and sort of the entrepreneur community, people are always, they're always saying bad things about jobs, but jobs are a good thing, they solve an important problem. But they're low risk, low reward. And up here is where a startup is. It's a really high risk, really high reward. Really high potential reward. And so if things work out well for you, you could end up like one of the other companies in the same Y Combinator round that I was in, Heroku. You might end up like this. I haven't actually been to the new Heroku headquarters in San Francisco, but I've been told that this is pretty much what it looks like. The problem is that more likely if you start a startup, you'll end up with my situation. And so I started to reflect on this risk-reward spectrum, and I thought, I think there are a lot of good reasons to start a startup, but solving your money problem isn't really one of them. I mean, it might work out for you, but the chances are that you'll be left with very little. And so I thought maybe there's like a sweet spot in between. Maybe there's sort of a medium risk, medium reward kind of situation. You want to end up like a pirate sitting on a bunch of gold doubloons, but you also want to end up with this. I thought maybe I can do something in between. Like this would solve my money problem. I don't really need to be super rich, just something more than this like very small amount. And so I did reflect at this point though on one of the core principles of startups, which is to make something people want. This is incredibly difficult. And it is in fact the Y Combinator motto. You might be able to see this on the shirt. Make something people want. This is a shirt that you get when you join the program. It's really, really hard to make something people want. Don't underestimate how hard that is. But I looked at this and said, you know what? I have made something people wanted. Railspace did pretty well. Maybe I can write another Rails tutorial book and turn Railspace into this. But maybe I can write another book. And in fact, I thought, this isn't going to be enough because it's a technical book. It's not going to be enough to solve my money problem. But I used my knowledge of the market for Rails educational products, which I've been consuming myself and had contributed to see this gap in the marketplace, which I believed that there was a need for a long, comprehensive introduction to Rails, a series of screencasts, much more comprehensive than had been made before. This is based partially on my intuition from having taught the core curriculum in physics at Caltech. I feel like becoming a basically competent Rails developer was about the size of like a one-term course at Caltech, like Physics 1A, which is about 20 hours of instruction. So I thought maybe 10 to 20 hours of instruction, which was much longer than anything else out there. I also knew Rails 3 was coming out, so I thought that there might be some good timing. And so this is one of the first marketing principles that I learned as a geek, sort of coming to marketing educational products, which is to address a market you understand. This is so important, I think, to address a market where you really know what's going on. And I also think that sort of implicit in this is this idea that you should do something you're good at. In other words, you should understand the market and you should be able to address that market and do it well. And so I knew that I could write a good book because I'd done it before with Railspace, and I also knew that I could make screencasts, even though I hadn't done a lot of screencasting. It's essentially just teaching, and I had a lot of success in the classroom at Caltech, so I figured that I could do this. There was another principle that I adopted really early on, and it was later driven home to me by a certain Sith Lord who's actually in the audience right now. This is a common thing in information product marketing, but Giles Boquet really drove this home for me, which is you should give something away. This is an incredibly powerful marketing tool. And so even from the start, I thought, I want my book to be available for free as HTML. So I had a vision for what this could be, something approximately like this. Now, I want to emphasize that this is not charity. In fact, I'm a little jaded about charity, actually, and pointed opinions on charity. This is not charity. This is a business strategy. If you have a free HTML book online, I thought, people will give you inbound links, right? They'll link to you. Especially because it's free, right? You're much more likely to refer people to a free source. And I also thought, the search engines, they can come in and index it. Like, the web is made of text and links. I should make a book that's made of text and links. It's also good karma. If you give away a book, people notice. And even though I'm jaded about charity, it really feels good. The first time you get an email from some guy in India saying, you know, I can't afford to buy your product, but thank you for making the book free online. I just used it to learn Rails. Like, that's going to get to you, no matter who you are. But as great as it is to give away a free book online, let it be noted, it's not going to solve your money problem. It's not a viable business model. But so I had a plan. I had a vision for what this could be. I said, I'm going to take an HTML book and I'm going to put it online for free. But then I'm going to make a PDF of the same book, and I'm going to make some screencasts, and I'm going to sell those. That was the plan. And so I just want to note that there's a big surprise here. You have already thought about this. Wait a minute, you're going to sell a PDF of a book that's available for free online? This is one of the biggest surprises of this whole thing. People will buy a PDF. It's unbelievable. I'll talk a little bit more about this later. And so in order to realize this vision, I actually needed some tools. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my tool chain and the technology I use. So I wanted to implement this dual publishing model, this idea that I could start with a single source file and convert it to an HTML book and also convert it to PDF. I wanted to be able to make two books from the same source. And so to this end, I sort of looked around and looked at all the different options, and there were some things that met some of my needs, but nothing that really met all of the requirements. And so I rolled up my sleeves and I wrote my own system called PolyTeXnic. And so some of you might be able to guess from the tech here that PolyTeXnic is ultimately based on Donald Knuth's tech typesetting engine. In particular, it starts with LaTeX, which is a series of macros written on top of tech for making documents like articles and books. And it converts a select subset of HTML, or of LaTeX to HTML. Now there are some projects, there's a thing called LaTeX to HTML, but it's terrible because it tries to be too general. I just support the subset that I need to make a book. And then there's a little bit of trickery here, but it's really easy once you have a LaTeX file to make a PDF. There's some, PolyTeXnic has some extra stuff to make it a nice PDF. But this part is easy, but there's a program called PDF LaTeX. So PolyTeXnic met my needs for a number of reasons, but one of the requirements was that I'd be able to typeset code. And so I just want you to see, this is a web page. This is the PDF. They're not exactly the same, but they're pretty close. It's the same source file, so they're in sync by its construction. If you want to see the full result, you can go to railstutorial.org/book. And it's a real book. I mean, it's a 500-page PDF, and it's all online. Just as an aside, and one of the reasons I chose LaTeX is because I wanted to be able to typeset mathematics. And all good math typesetting, or all roads to good math typesetting lead through tech. And so there is an example of one of these documents that I made on the web. This is a web page with nice math typesetting. This uses MathJax to do the hard rendering. This is a document called the Tau Manifesto. Anyone have any Taoist? Is that right?
Converted.
All right. So, this is an anti-pi propaganda piece. You should totally read it at tauday.com. Really, read it. I'm being interviewed at CNN.com is interviewing me for this on Monday. It's becoming a thing, so you should check it out. So, as I approach PolyTeXnic, though, I need to tell you a little bit about it, and I have a confession to make, which this is hard to say, but I actually suck. I really do. I suck. I don't know how. I don't have a background in academic computer science. I don't know how. This is a markup system. Maybe I need to write a parser. It's like I don't really know much about this. But I thought this is one of the situations where there's this potential barrier. I need some activation energy to get over that potential barrier. And instead of worrying about not being good enough to write a parser, I'm just gonna plunge forward. And I was inspired by this code. Anyone recognize this horrible language? What is this horrible language? It's not Perl. This is Perl. This is Perl, and in fact, this is part of the source code from Markdown.pl. Markdown for those of you who don't know, is a nice lightweight markup language that can be easily converted to HTML. And if you look at it, if you read Perl, this is just a global regular expression substitution. But in Ruby, we call it a G-sub. And I saw this; it was inspiring. I thought, well, I might not be some sort of computer science genius, but I can write a bunch of G-subs. So PolyTeXnic is basically a bunch of G-subs. It has a really good test suite though, so it can be refactored. Once I figured out how to do it right. And once Judson helps me do it right. So I wrote PolyTeXnic, and it was good enough to write the book. And so I started. And I started by giving something away. But you can't just give something away, you have to do something else. You have to pimp your product. Now, I find self-promotion very unnatural and awkward, but I've discovered that I can pimp my product. So from practice, I've learned how to pimp my product. And so in particular, I got in touch with an awesome guy named Peter Cooper, who launched the first 4 chapters of my book for me on Rails Inside. So this is the little brother to Ruby Inside, which is the biggest Ruby blog. So this is how it started. I gave away the first 4 chapters. And if you're thinking about ever doing this sort of thing, you may wonder, well, how do I get my thing on Rails Inside? Or how do I get other people to pimp my product for me? And so it's important to know that humans are primates. You may not be aware of this, but humans are primates. And they're more likely to do things for people if they have met them, or if they have met someone who can give, or if they get a personal introduction. So it is a really good idea as a computer programmer to get out of your room and go meet people, and I especially recommend going to conferences. So go to conferences. Everyone in this room, you've already followed this rule, which is great. People who are watching this recorded, you should know that the value of a conference is only partially in the talks. A lot of the value is just meeting people. One of the other marketing techniques I used was to have lots of launches. Lots of little launches. So I did the first 4 chapters, right? And then 1 chapter at a time after that. And every one of the chapter releases was a little event. And every time it happened, I would send a post to my newsfeed, I would tweet about it, and I would submit it to Hacker News. So this is my Hacker News submission page. I know this is too small to read, so I'll indicate with red arrows the submissions that are Rails tutorial related. Remember, pimp your product. So let it be noted though, we still have a problem. This is still not solving my money problem, right? I'm still just giving everything away. And so I want to talk about the e-commerce toolchain that I used. Now, if you ever want to sell stuff online, you're going to discover that you'll be paralyzed by all your choices, right? This is the activation energy problem. So Amy Hoy has a mantra: worry about it when you're rich. Don't agonize over every choice. You want to accept payments, right? I know it hurts. It's like, no, I don't want to. Yes. You're going to use PayPal. Worry about it when you're rich. I know you want to use something else, but use PayPal. You need to have some sort of cart maybe, like coupon codes. You need to handle file downloads. You're going to use eJunkie. I decided to use eJunkie. eJunkie, I mean, with a name like eJunkie, can it possibly be good? Their UI is written in Flash. I'm not kidding, it's horrible. But no, worry about it when you're rich. Okay, storage. You're going to store it someplace it's like something cool and cheap, and I can do better than, no, you can't do it better than Amazon Web Services. You can't. Worry about it when you're rich. Just use S3. Okay, so launch time finally came. I said, I'm just going to make these, no decisions, just do the defaults. And just get something out there. So launch time came for the PDF. This is PDF sales for the Rails 3, Ruby on Rails 3 tutorial. So remember, you have to pimp your product. This was the main launch on Ruby Inside, Michael Hartl's Rails 3 tutorial book. There's a Ruby on Rails tutorial Learn Rails by Example link there, by the way. This is a good thing to have. Someone linking to your site with. That's good link text. I also got a post. Greg Pollock made a post on writing Rails, the main Rails blog. Rails has great documentation. The first example, railstutorial.org. So how do you arrange this? How do you launch your thing on Ruby Inside and writing Rails? Humans are primates. You cultivate relationships with people. Go to conferences. So remember our surprise? People will buy a PDF. They will buy a PDF. There was a time when there was no screencast. It was just the online book and the PDF. And people bought the PDF. Like, lots of people bought the PDF. Even after the initial launch event, like even a couple months out, I was still selling like 3 PDFs a day. Which isn't, vast wealth, but dude, it was a $39 PDF, so, it's pretty good. The amazing thing is, too, that I discovered, I kept thinking people they're gonna buy the PDF and then they're gonna feel burned because they're gonna discover that it's available for free online. But I was amazed. This is another surprise. They want to pay you. You have no idea how much people want to pay you. So I got an email from a guy saying, I bought your PDF and I just discovered that it was available for free online. Can I get a refund? And I wrote back and said, no problem, I just gave you a refund. In fact, I'm surprised that more people haven't asked for refunds because the whole thing is available for free online. And the next day he wrote back and said, I have to admit I wasn't completely honest with you. I think your book is great and it's really worth it. I'm just kind of running short of money right now. And so I wrote back to him and said, don't worry about it, dude. I know what it's like to run short of money. Keep the refund, keep the PDF as a gift. It's okay. And I looked at my logs later that day. He went back and rebought the PDF. Give people an opportunity to pay you. It's amazing. So I had this PDF book, but the real flagship product was these screencasts. And so the last part of the tool chain you need to know about is what you do for making screencasts. And this is really easy. You should use ScreenFlow. ScreenFlow is awesome. It does everything you could ever want and more. In fact, I used hardly any of the fancy features of ScreenFlow. As you may know, ScreenFlow for screencasting is available only on the Mac. So I do have an alternative for you if you don't have the situation. You should first buy a Mac, and then you should use ScreenFlow to make your screencasts. So I made the screencast. This was like 2.5 months of bone-crushing effort to make this screencast, more than 15 hours of screencasts. And it came time to launch them. And here it is. Ruby Inside, Michael Hartl's 15 hours of Rails 3 screencast. This is really exciting. And I discovered that through this, that not only do they want to pay you, they really want to pay you. So let me tell you about a guy who wrote in. I got an email from a guy in Nigeria. I got this Nigerian email. In fact, I have an email here for you. This is it. Request for urgent business relationship. We are talking to the federal government contract. No, but seriously, I actually got an email from a guy in Nigeria saying, I'm having trouble buying your screencasts. There's some issue with the country code at PayPal. And we exchanged a few emails, and I said, maybe you can pay by credit card. And I finally said, this is ridiculous. Like, I want to support this guy in Nigeria. Okay, I emailed him and said, here's a link for a free copy of the PDF screencast bundle. Like, please enjoy it. He wrote back and said, thank you very much. I'm still going to find a way to pay you. And a week later, he wrote back and said, okay, it's taken a lot of time, but I figured out a way to pay you $95, which was the price of the PDF screencast bundle. So it's shocking that people, they really, really want to pay you. Give them an opportunity, not a donate link. Give people an opportunity to pay you for a product that gives them some value. So I want to talk a little bit about the implications of this. Look at this model again. And we've got an HTML book, or an HTML document for free online, and a PDF with screencasts for sale. Now, if you look at this is a freemium model for content. It says you can actually give away your entire book and still sell the PDF and then sell screencasts as well. And so this is applicable to lots of different kinds of content, but I have a specific suggestion for the people in this room. What sucks about open source software? Open source, this software, this new open source library is really great, but the documentation sucks. So I have a suggestion for solving this problem. I want to align the financial interests of people who write good documentation. I want to align people's financial interests with writing good documentation. Now you can do this with any project, your own project or another project, but this is the basic idea, which is to put an HTML documentation, tutorial or structured documentation, on the web for free. And then make a PDF, and possibly some screencasts, and sell them. Now, you might notice that in my tool chain, there's one thing that you wouldn't necessarily have access to if you wanted to replicate my exact model, which is PolyTeXnic. And so I want to say PolyTeXnic will I really swear someday, release open source software, probably, definitely. So there are a number of reasons I haven't released PolyTeXnic yet. One of them is that open source software documentation sucks, and I don't want to be part of the problem. I want PolyTeXnic to have good documentation right from the start. But now luckily, I have a tool for writing that document. It's called PolyTeXnic. And in fact, I have an idea for how to align my financial interests with this documentation. I'm going to write an article or possibly a book on how to use PolyTeXnic and make it free online. And then I'm going to make a PDF and a screencast teaching you how to use PolyTeXnic and make that for sale. So not only will PolyTeXnic be used to write the documentation for PolyTeXnic, but it will also be monetized using the business model for which PolyTeXnic was written. We all know that Rubyists love meta. So I'd like to quickly acknowledge the images I use in an extremely small, unreadable font. But these are the images. And I do have a coda, though. I want to note that I haven't actually answered the question implicit in the premise of this talk, which is, did the Rails tutorial project solve my money problem? Did it solve my money problem? Wait a minute, that's the wrong slide. Yes! Yes, it solved my money problem. I reached the code victory. There were really successful launches. The PDF launch and especially the screencast launch went really well. And it continues to sell. I have a passive income stream from that. And something I haven't even mentioned, which is actually a pretty cool part of this, the book has also been published. It's available at an Amazon near you, and here it is. There's the print edition. This is part of the Addison Wesley Professional Ruby series. And I just want to, usually you say the full disclosure, this here is an affiliate link. Now, and I think you already knew I had a financial interest in the sales of this book. And so if you use this link, then I win coming and going, because I get a commission and a royalty. The screencasts are also being published by Addison Wesley too, so in Inform IT and Safari Books Online have those. So I've got this passive income source and plus whatever the royalties might be. I don't know what they're going to be, but there'll be something not zero, I hope. And maybe the coolest thing about publishing your own stuff is that you end up with a customer base. So I've got a bunch of people, many of whom paid me $95. This is a really qualified list of customers. These are people who really are likely to buy follow-on products. So if I ever find myself in the position I was in at the end of the Y Combinator program, where I was worried about paying the rent, 3-4 months down the line, I can make another product, and I certainly have ideas for follow-on products. So this whole thing couldn't have been done without a whole bunch of awesome people, and so I'd like to thank some of them. On the left, we've got Peter Cooper and Greg Pollock and Matt Avanetti. These guys have just been stalwarts. Matt Avanetti helped me get this thing kicked off. You introduced me to Peter Cooper. Greg has been an incredible supporter. If you go to the end of Rails for Zombies, the Rails 3 tutorial link there is to the Rails tutorial project, which is awesome. Obi Fernandez was the series editor on the professional Ruby series and really helped make this sort of made it possible for me to sell the stuff from my website and also get it published. And he wrote me a great foreword as well. Ari Prohaska was the co-author on Railspace, and this would never have happened without him. I'd also like to thank Amy Hoy and Giles Boquette for being inspirations when it comes to selling educational information products online. Derek Sivers, for those of you who don't know him, is incredibly awesome. Go to sivers.org and read what he has to say. Derek wrote me an unbelievably awesome foreword. You should read that online. It's really amazing. So Derek is great. And Ron Evans didn't have anything specifically to do with this project, but has been one of my biggest supporters in the Ruby community. So, and you'll be seeing him speak next. And finally, Evan Dorn, who we just saw talk about NinjaScript, has been a friend of mine for more than a decade, and his company, Logical Reality, had a hand in a lot of this, including the design and development of the Rails tutorial website itself. I'd also like to thank all the Rails tutorial readers. One of the cool things about publishing online is that you can outsource some of your debugging and copy editing. When you publish one chapter at a time, people write in and say, hey, there's a problem with your controller in this code listing, or there's a typo. And it's really awesome when you can fix the error and deploy the fix, and then write back and say, thanks for the report, it's fixed. And they can just reload the browser, and it's awesome. And finally, this has been great talking to you this morning and having the chance to tell you about this story. So, thank you. We've got some time for questions. Yes, Wolf.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Very inspiring. I'm curious if you understand on insights why people buy the PDF even though the HTML is online for free.
Yeah, the question is why do people buy the PDF even though it's available online for free? I think that people really like to be able to take that file with them, put it on the computer and not worry about whether they're going to be online or not. They can put it on a USB drive, they can put it on their iPad or their Kindle. By the way, I mentioned iPad and Kindle. I do have the proof of concept for an EPUB version of this. PolyTeXnic, I hope eventually will support EPUB and maybe media formats as well. But so people like having that file that is theirs. But I am surprised that as many people bought it as have bought it. Other questions?
How many copies have you sold of the Screencast?
So the question is how many copies of the Screencast have I sold? I don't know offhand, but if I don't want to reveal specific numbers necessarily, but I'll say that. Let's see.
What is the solar system?
Well, yeah, so I've sold many hundreds. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I don't know if it's more or less than 1,000, but it's somewhere in that range. Yeah.
Did you consider broadening out into becoming a publisher for other people? Maybe like Jeff Rosenbach at Geek Code or something like that?
Yeah, the question is, have I thought about broadening out and becoming a publisher for other people, like Jeffrey Rosenbach at PeepCode? Certainly PeepCode is an inspiration for this, and in fact I pitched this idea to Jeffrey at Gogoruko a couple years ago, and said, I want to make something that's like takes people from zero to PeepCode, so that they could sort of go to his material. I think that my thing is the intersection of education and technical subjects, and I don't see that my thing having better taste or better recruiting abilities to get authors to, or screencasters to come work for me. So Jeffrey's gotten really good at recruiting good people. I think that my competitive advantage is that there are certain things I can do really well. And so what I'm interested in is scaling those things up. I taught physics at Caltech, which was great, but that teaching in a classroom setting doesn't scale very well. So the idea behind this whole thing is to make a product that I can capture, or I can capture what I do as an educator, and then sell it to potentially to a large number of people. Any other questions?